the condition of our country. They want to put in wildlife corridors, all of these crazy things. They were even talking about ending the use of live bait to go fishing in Colorado. It's mind-blowing. We'll never change the world until everybody sits in the dark, cold and hungry. To your point, it's not too late. We may have to suffer to get back to the basics. That's how I see it.
From the mods to the King Ranch, the war on ranchers in the United States is a real war, and it's impacting your prices at the grocery store. Today, I'm going to sit down with Shad Sullivan. We're going to discuss some of these issues in detail, from wildlife corridors to price fixing in the markets, you name it. If you want to know more about why beef prices are so high at the grocery store, watch this podcast. And of course, if you want to hear more from Shad Sullivan and you're interested in these topics, I highly suggest you watch the Lonesome Lands podcast. Shad and Jim do a great job of keeping you up to date on what's happening in the world of ranchers.
I am an American cattle rancher, and my family has operations in North Texas as well as Southeast Colorado. My family has a long history of producing beef on the land, especially in Southeast Colorado, where I am a fifth and sixth generation, cattle rancher, depending on what side of the family we are talking about. But both sides of my family became interwoven around the turn of the century when they opened homesteading up on the southeast plains of Colorado, and we've been there ever since. Some of them, they came from all over, but they became interwoven, and we've been producing on that land since about 1899. And my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family were long community members, standing community members in what we call the Four Corners region of El Paso, Pueblo, Crowley, and Lincoln counties, Colorado, which is high plains, dry, arid, 9 inches of precipitation a year, and we just kind of have been deeply rooted in the land ever since then.
Many of you have noticed that we keep wearing these leather patch hats that say Defend the Right to Farm on them. These leather patch hats support our nonprofit, Meet My Neighbor Productions. You can get your hat at Yanasa Trading Co. and help us defend the right to farm through education, outreach, and, as we've been doing over the last couple of years, farm relief efforts. So get your leather patch hat and let others know that you defend the right to farm. Why don't you give us a little backstory on what happened in 1999?
In order to understand that story, we've got to go back to about 1981. And my dad, we have a home ranch, a home base, a headquartered base that we own. But my dad had leased a very large chunk of land from John Hancock Life Insurance out of New York that had foreclosed on what was at that time called the Box T Ranch, or Colorado Arizona Cattle Company. And my dad leased a large chunk of that, and for several years, about 10 years, we leased that from John Hancock Life Insurance. And then they decided they wanted to sell it, and so my dad was a willing participant in that and put a down payment on it. And in that, the whole ranch at that time was about 186,000 acres, and in that, we leased 49,000 acres. And so my dad decided we would buy that in 1992. And when we went to, negotiate terms, the state land board comes in and they say, in that 49,000 acres, there's 12,000 acres of state-owned land, and it was in small parcels, 320s, 160s, 80s, just all over the place. None of it was fenced. And so they came in to my dad and said, hey, if you want the leases on that 12,000 acres, you're going to have to, after you purchase it, you're going to have to block it up into one 12,000 acre block. And this is where the block has to be. And it just so happened that it was over the main source of water. And on a large portion, about 25,000 acres of that, we had 2 wells, and we ran pipelines, 30 miles of pipeline, and that's how we watered the ranch. And they wanted the land right over that, which was deeded at the time. And my dad's like, oh, we're not doing that. Make a long story short, we backed out of the purchase. They caused a no-sell on the ranch. So with them understanding that they caused the no-sell, it kind of caused a big disturbance. They decide, the state land board comes in there and decides they're going to buy the whole ranch. Now, mind you, in Colorado, state lands, the revenue off of state lands is meant to go to the schools. That's how we run our schools in Colorado. Okay, so they decide in the meantime they're going to buy the ranch. It was within 2 weeks that they had bought it and closed on it. And my dad's like, well, we're going to probably sue you guys because you stopped the sale of the ranch to us. And so they came in and said, well, let's negotiate a deal. And so a lease deal. And so Dad's like, well, we might be able to do that. So they did. They negotiated a lease deal with us, and it was a 25-year lease. And that would have been in 1992. Well, in 1996, state legislature passes a bill that would set 300,000 acres of state-owned land aside for preservation. We're just starting to get into this conservation, preservation, environmental stuff. And so somebody nominated that ranch to set aside for preservation. And with that nomination enters in a partnership with the Nature Conservancy. So the state owns the land. The Nature Conservancy is now coming in to manage these state-owned lands. And it just fell apart from there. And we had a 25-year lease on it. And by 1999, the State Land Board and the Nature Conservancy had taken the whole thing away from us, kicked us off, and actually acted like the contract meant nothing. And so it really threw a kink in our operation, obviously. We had put about 30 miles of pipeline on there and cross-fenced it. I mean, we had spent a lifetime over there. I grew up over there. And so we owned a lot of that infrastructure ourselves. And it didn't matter. I mean, we were nobodies. They treated us like, once the Nature Conservancy came in, and of course, I can't remember if the State Land Board was democratically controlled. That isn't the State Land Board positions are appointed by the governor, and I can't remember who was governor at that time, and I was a young man, so it didn't matter. But anyway, so by 1999, they had completely kicked us off, and I'll never forget, Charlie, my dad was just devastated, and we all were. And I said, let's go to the state attorney's general office. And so we went up there, and this was before cell phones, or at least we didn't have cell phones. And I can remember talking to that young attorney general, and he said to my dad, he said, Mr. Sullivan, you are on the moral right side of this issue. He said, but I work for the state and you will never beat me in court. And I remember the look on my dad's face that day, and he was defeated. And we come home from Denver, and he was upset. What are we going to do? This is a large portion of our operation. And my mom, who, was born and raised on the ranch that we own today, and she said, we're going to pick up the pieces and we're going to go find another ranch. And so we did. We found a ranch in Nebraska and spent 10 years up there. But it was a lost opportunity cost in 1999 of $8 million for our family, and never received one bit of compensation for the infrastructure, nothing. It was just a total takeover. And really, that's really what planted the seed of corruption in me. And I knew we were on kind of a tough path, but as a young guy, you're still just, having fun and not really thinking about the business that much, and thought it was just something that happened to us, right? I didn't realize this was the beginning of a cultural change in Colorado. And that's exactly what it was. And so today, the State Land Board owns 2 million surface acres and 4 million subsurface acres in Colorado, and is buying more all the time. They're in the land business now, and they have partnerships, public-private partnerships with the Nature Conservancy and other entities, and they're just running roughshod. They're spending the people's money like it's theirs, and they are not supposed to be in the land business. And that's the story that I come from.
Yeah, I actually was reading a story about a ranch in Loveland the other day that I guess they purchased it, they took the water rights, and then they gave it over to the school system, which I don't even think needs a school there right now, but they did it just to acquire the ranch and its water rights.
They gave it to the school, the local school. Wow. Well, in Colorado water law, my dad always told me, he said, you should have went to school for water law because, that's another story. I can remember my dad telling me when I was a really small kid, he pounded it in our heads because we are from such dry country. It's some of the most productive as far as grazing country. It's the best I've ever been on. And we've run cattle from, South Dakota to South Texas, and we don't get the gains anywhere like we do on the shortgrass prairies of Colorado, especially in Crowley, Pueblo, Lincoln, and El Paso counties. But I can remember my dad pounding into my siblings and I's head that water was always going to be worth more than gold. And he said, protect your water, because he remembered in the 1950s when the state came in and took the subsurface rights to the water. Now, there are surface rights, and that gets into a whole mess of stuff I don't really understand, but I come from Crowley County, Colorado, which in 1892, the founders of the county went up into the mountains and laid claim to what they call Twin Lakes Reservoir, and they built this superior irrigation system that actually comes through the mountains. They built these tunnels you can drive a pickup up, and brought that water, Twin Lakes water, to Crowley County, which would be a couple hundred miles away. They dug the Colorado Canal, which splits our county in half, and from about 1892 to the early 1970s, we were one of the most prosperous counties in the nation. We grew everything from tomatoes to cantaloupe, watermelon, corn, orchards of all kinds. And then, of course, the urban sprawl began, and the city started needing water. So they came to the farmers in Crowley County, and they said, we need water for the cities. Will you sell your water rights? Now, these are preemptive water rights, so they're old water rights, and some of these farmers needed the money or decided they were getting out. At that time, I don't think needing the money was the way to say it, but they sold a few water rights. And then in the 1980s, early 1980s, Denver came back, wanted more water, and it just kept happening. And I don't know what those water rights would be worth today. There are about 4 or 5 families that have some of the water rights left, but there's not enough water to come down the ditch to farm, so that water is leased back to Denver, because most of it's going to Aurora and Denver. And what that did, Charlie, is it dried our county up. It took the prosperity away from our county, and we went from one of the most influential, prosperous agricultural counties in the nation for 2-3 generations, and now we are one of the poorest counties in the nation, and certainly in the state of Colorado. The land dried up. It's gone. There's no production on, where they used to farm, and our schools died. We had to bring in prisons we have 2 prisons now that provide revenue. We have 1 large feed yard, and that's really for big business, large volume businesses and tax base. That's where we're at. And, my dad warned me of that. He said, if you ever lose your water, if you ever give your water away, you give your prosperity away. He said, always protect it. And so it was a sad thing to see. And when they sold those water rights, I mean, that was a huge deal.
everybody is calling for a much colder, stormier winter. What does that mean for you? Well, it means that there could be possible power outages and some very long, dark days, because as you know, the days are only getting shorter from here on out. Yanasa Trading Co. has finally launched its Bee Yard collection. We currently have natural beeswax candles for sale on Yanasa Trading Co. These candles last about 10 hours each. They're clean burning. Unlike paraffin candles that put toxins into the air, beeswax candles actually help neutralize the air. We only use beeswax candles in our household because we care about our health, we care about our children's health, and we like the smell of warm honey in the dead of winter. Check out Yanasa Trading Co. and order your beeswax candles today.
Water today is definitely worth more than gold, as much as people are paying for it. Then you have the data centers coming in to some pretty arid areas, and they're taking even more of the water rights because Amazon, they kind of lied about how much water they were using, but sorry. There was a report out from The Guardian that showed that they actually used as much water in 2021 as it took to provide water to 1 million American households. That's a lot of water. That's a lot more than ranching is.
I don't really understand, why are they putting these massive data centers in these arid locations? There's one in Abilene, Texas. There's nowhere drier and hotter on earth than Abilene, Texas in the middle of summer. And so now we've got, I've got friends that are kind of in the pathway of those power lines that are going to be going to these data centers, and they're eminent domaining them, and it seems like it's an out of control issue. And I don't understand anything about technology or AI or those data centers, but I do know this, that the water, once the water is taken from the people, it's over. It's really tough to make a living.
With power lines, so you just went through a scenario out there in Colorado where Xcel's big power line is going right through your property now, right?
Correct. Yeah. So in 2022 or late 21, early 22, we got notice in our county that Xcel Energy, one of the largest power companies in the nation, was going to put a power line across southeast Colorado. Well, what it is called is the Colorado Power Pathway. And the goal of these, there's 6 corridors, and what the goal of it is to force renewables out onto the eastern plains and then bring that power back to the Front Range. As you well know, Colorado is a square and it's half mountains, half plains. So you get out there on the far eastern plains, and there's a lot of windmills, solar energy production coming in. One of the reasons there is because our state decided that it would be a great idea if we had a zero carbon footprint and were 100% renewable by 2040. That was Governor Polis's goal. And so Xcel Energy, I don't know how long they had this in. I did not think it was going to affect us on our ranch. And I got a call one day in about 2022. I was in Texas, of course, and this call came from the county extension agent, and she said, "You need to get up here. They're having Xcel Energy's having a meeting about this power line going through your ranch." And I said, "What are you talking about?" I had no idea. I knew that the Colorado power pathway was occurring. I thought it was north of us and into the next counties north. And she said, no. She said, it's going right across you guys. And I said, Mary Beth, I don't think you're right, but let me take a look. Well, sure enough, we start getting letters. And so they start having what they call community meetings. And these community meetings are designed to tell the citizens of your county and your community what the plan is. When I walked in, we have a wonderful, which you would love, historic center in Crowley, Colorado. It's in Crowley County where I live. There's 4 towns: Sugar City, Ordway, which is the county seat, Crowley, and Alney Springs. And in Crowley, years ago we took a an old school, and we made it our county heritage center, and it is fantastic. You would love it, Charlie. Anyway, so the corridor, which is corridor number 4, we had a community meeting, and we were invited down there. And you walk into this big, beautiful old school, and Xcel Energy has literally 12 groups of 3 people, each at a station, and there were about 12 stations to answer all of these questions that we may have and show us maps and tell us what's going on and all this stuff. Well, they laid the map out in front of us on this huge table, and sure enough, it's going right across our ranch for 4 miles. And I'm like, holy cow. And of course, my neighbors are intrigued, and we're all chitter-chattering around, and I can remember one of their employees by the name of Nisha, and she comes over and she says, "Can I answer any questions?" And I said, "Well, yeah. I mean, the county hasn't even approved this. Why is this happening?" And she says, "Oh, but your county did approve it a year ago," which we had no idea. And they probably did publish it in our little town paper, which is literally one front and one back. That's our paper. I mean, we're lucky to have it still, but nobody looks at it, and that's the problem. So nobody knew about it for a year before the county commissioners had already approved it. And so we all get into this long, drawn-out mess. And I can remember a buddy of mine was standing beside me that day, and he said, "Well, we're not going to participate in this." And this lady looked at him and said, "Well, we will use eminent domain if we have to. It is on the table." And I kind of knew then we were up against something pretty big. And so we started negotiating it. The negotiations took 2 years. And listen, I'm not against, in Colorado, the Constitution allows for eminent domain for the greater good, right? And so I'm like, well, it's for the greater good, so they're going to give us eminent domain or take us to court. But I'm not against the power line. I'm not against progress. I really don't want this huge monstrosity of a power line coming across our ranch. But in the name of progress and for the greater good, you're not going to stop it. But they have to compensate us. So I went to negotiating with them, and they just stroked your ego and made you feel good, but at the same time, when you left the meeting, you knew you'd been beat. So a group of us formed a coalition, and we put a lot of money into the coalition, hired a lawyer, and as soon as Xcel Energy found out that we formed a coalition, it was game on. I mean, they did everything in their power to destroy us. And they did, Charlie. They took us out of that coalition one by one. And we had zero power. And once they break a coalition up, they have you in the crosshairs all by yourself. And so we really lost the coalition due to, number one, I would say lack of respect from Xcel. I mean, they just made us. It kind of just reminds me of somebody stepping on a snake's head. That's how I felt. And so we went on. I hired another lawyer out of Wyoming on a personal basis, and I said, if we can't stop it, let's negotiate these terms. And so we started negotiating terms. I met with their representatives several times. I said, this is what we have to have. And in my mind, I said, here's the thing. They were going to offer us so much per acre, and it's a 60-foot swath, and they were going to offer us so much per acre, and we'd go from there. Well, I said, here's the thing, is number one, there's all of these issues that are coming up with this. What are our land rights? What's going to happen in the future? How is the value of our ranch? Is it devalued? Are we going to, what are the problems that could arise? And I took all of this into consideration. I presented them a package of my thoughts, and I said, here's the number that we will do it. We will allow you to come across our ranch for. This is the number. And then just like if I were in Texas, I said, all right, on an oil lease, if there is a an oil well near your fence line, well, normally the guy who on the other side of the fence will he gets to share in that oil well because it probably takes oil off his land, whatever. So I got thinking, well, that's kind of the same with this. We're going to have to look at it. All of our neighbors are going to have to look at it, and they are going to draw income. Xcel Energy is going to make billions and billions and billions of dollars off of this for the next 100 years. And that should be compensated for us because we're facilitating that. And so I presented that. It was a good presentation, I thought. And I thought, yeah, we're going to get this. It's going to be really good. And I met their representative in Amarillo for lunch. He stroked my ego. We became friends. He's like, yeah, we can work with you, all this stuff. And he was lying out his teeth. And I've told him on the phone 100 times. I said, you ain't nothing but a liar. And he don't care. I mean, it's like we're still friends. He doesn't care what I call him. He's there to do a job, right? And so he got his job done, and they come back in about 6 or 8 months of fighting with him, and they said, this is what we're paying you. We're not paying you anymore. And I said, well, let's go to court. And so I went and talked to an older gentleman who had done some really good business with them and knew how to, negotiate. And he said, don't go to the courthouse. Get it done before you get on the courthouse step. Well, to make a long story short, Charlie, they beat the living hell out of us, right? And under Colorado law, they're going to build the power line on you. If you go to court, the way the law is, you're only negotiating a financial package while they're outside of the courtroom building on your land. That's the law. And under Colorado law, if you lose in court, they are only obligated to pay you what the land is valued at agriculturally. So our land there at the time was valued, tops at $300 an acre. And so that would have paid us like, I can't remember, $26,000 or $27,000 for this huge line. So my lawyer advised me. He said, Shad, you're not going to win. It's kind of over. They beat the hell out of him too. They really did. I mean, he had, he was beat down and I was beat down, and I said, I guess we don't have a choice. Just take what they offered, which ended up being $3,500 an acre across this 4-mile span, 90 feet across. And, it was better than nothing, but we didn't want it. And you look out my mom's front kitchen window, and she lives in a 100-year-old home, 110-year-old home, and has been there her whole life. And she looks out across the prairie, which is, you have to love the Southeast Colorado prairies. You have to be born and raised there to love them. And she loves that. And now she's going to look at these huge power lines, and it's sad. It's, I guess in the name of, progress for the Front Range, fine, but it's sad because there is no longer, from my mom's house, where her house sits on what we call Antelope Mesa, you can see to the west, you can see Monument Hill, which is on the very south side of Denver, clear to Raton, New Mexico, which would be 230 miles, and we can see that whole span without anything in the way. And then looking east off of the edge of the mesa, we can see 60 miles north to south. And so now that view shed is gone. There was nothing there, absolutely nothing there except beautiful prairies. And now there's going to be this monstrosity of a line that doesn't even go straight. It just meanders and jigs and jags through. I don't even know how they do all that. But all of us on that line in Crowley County got the shit beat out of us, and we're going to have us a power line.
It's interesting. There's a case going to the Supreme Court right now because when you give eminent domain power to a private entity like that, they they're going to railroad you because they have eminent domain power. But some ranchers in North Dakota had fought in court how much they were getting paid or compensated from the pipeline companies. They won, but it cost them more money in attorney's fees to win the case, and the judge wouldn't award them their attorney's fees. So, which just gives more power to eminent domain.
Absolutely.
Because it's basically a roadblock saying you want to argue this in court, you're going to walk away even worse. No matter how you look at it, you can win and you still lose. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Supreme Court picks that case up, because it could have an impact for everybody dealing with eminent domain down the road.
It's certainly a precedent setter. I ended up spending $25,000 trying to defend it, and I got nothing. I mean, we got a power line, and it's just heartbreaking, just the change. You grow up and you see your ranch and your country, and here's the deal. I mean, you have this 60-foot wide easement with these power poles, and you're like, well, is it going to affect our wildlife, our cattle? Is it going to affect the value of our ranch? Should we ever need to sell that ranch? And then you had the Colorado legislature pass a bill that allows the public to run, walk, and bike on these easements under these power lines, right? Well, that's not going to end up good out on the Eastern Plains with all of these ranchers protecting their private property. I mean, you get somebody out there in a bike or jogging along in their little headband, and who knows what could happen with them there? Who knows? So do you
have to fence that off on either side? You can't let your cows pass through it. It just cuts you off?
No, we won't fence it off at all. They'll just go underneath it, So that won't be an issue. But I mean, as far as that, what they passed, yeah, I mean, now they're allowed that easement. They're allowed apparently to do their, I don't know, stuff. Now,
I put some bison on it and see how that turns out.
Yeah, well, Xcel Energy, they guaranteed, they said that will never happen on you guys. That will never. It was a huge concern. And then we got it is a power line with one pole, and these poles are monstrosities, huge poles. Well, they have to dig a test hole everywhere. And in our country, our water is deep, right? And these test holes, I don't know, they go 130 foot deep. Our water is anywhere from 25 foot deep to 150 foot deep where we're at on our ranch. And it's in veins of water. So it's not like a pool of water or an aquifer, it's a vein. And so one of the big concerns was these chemicals or whatever they're testing this with. They put down these holes and they test them one by one. Well, a lot of people were worried that it was going to, number one, ruin the access to that vein of water or make it change, or then whatever they're putting down in these holes, would it ruin the water supply down the road? And all very valid, questions. So
I'm sure Xcel told you not to worry about the chemicals.
Oh, absolutely they did. And I mean, they came in on us. I said, you guys have to have permission. You have to shut the gates. I said, every gate that's left open is a $500 fine. They agreed to that. Every truck that gets stuck is $1,000 fine. They have to revegetate everything. They ain't going to do nothing. I can guarantee that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Looking at the landscape today, I mean, the eminent domain has been a big issue. The power lines, water rights. We've seen people fighting water rights all over the West. But one of the bigger issues when it comes to cattle, we're at the smallest herd that we've been in for years. Demand has gone up, which is why beef prices are so high. But when you have people facing challenges of lease tenure and, easements coming across their property, what do you think it's going to take to bring the cattle herd back up?
Well, the cattle herd growing in size is not an overnight situation. It's not like hogs and chicken and sheep. We can't just hurry up and do it, right? And that's one of the issues, I'm so happy we're here. We're actually in my lifetime, I don't think I've ever been able to enjoy a supply and demand driven market. It's always, we've always been price takers, not price makers. And
but that gives you more money to invest to grow.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's very important. And listen, I love Trump. I am a Trump supporter all day long because I see the bigger picture. I like Trump because I hate communism. And I know where we were going through the last administration in the name of climate change and conservation. But Trump needed to stay out of the fray. The only way we're going to do this, Charlie, is to let it happen on its own. Now, the ability to expand onto these federal lands will be fantastic. It's not going to come overnight, though, because it takes 9 months to have a calf and then 18 months to produce that calf or to sell that calf.
And even then, because this is all part of Rollins' plans, which I started out skeptical of Rollins because of 12 years with what's his face with Obama and then Biden, Tom Vilsack, and then
Vilsack and Perdue both.
Yeah, I was going to say Sonny Perdue was one of my least favorites. I didn't know a whole lot about Rollins when she came in there, but she's surprised me routinely with some of the things that she's done. So this is, you're talking now, part of her plan to open up more BLM lands, but the bureaucracy of those agencies, in and of itself, not just raising the cows and the calves, but just trying to get all of them on board. And a lot of them are heavily influenced by the states that they're located in. Mm-hmm. So trying to get all those people on board, I don't think is an overnight process either. I think it's going to take time just to turn that around. And then you get the cows going on the land, and then you got to get the calves. Just my perspective.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. And one of the things that we have to remember in these bureaucracies is that these holdovers, these ideologues, that's what they are. They're ideologues. They were put in there, through Obama put them in, and they held them over through Trump. Bush was no different. These people were all the same. And so we have these 30 year ideologues still in here, and they had a plan, right? And Trump is not going to upset that plan. And that's why you've seen these ENGOs and NGOs double down. And now I really feel, and I'm very pro hunting, but I feel like that ideology has moved into these hunting groups to keep everything off the land, right? So everybody has a different need for the land. But the truth is if we're going to make our communities prosperous and mitigate what has happened in the West, because we've taken so many cattle off the land. The West has been burning. And that's why it's been burning, is because the cattle are not on the land like they were. But the problem, what you allude to, is true. We have to get through these bureaucracies, and that's going to be a problem. And so when Secretary Rollins come in, I didn't know anything about her, and I live in Texas, and we graduated. I think she graduated from Texas A&M a year behind me. I went to West Texas A&M, but we're both in the A&M system. I had no idea who she was, and so I wanted to learn more about her. Well, I kind of got a bad taste in my mouth up front, maybe because of friends peer pressuring me. I don't know. I had a lot of people that said, "Oh, I don't like her," and I'm kind of confused in the fray. And I took a step back and I said, "All right, let's see what happens here, because we're within the first year of the administration." Well, all of a sudden, you hear these rumblings that she is meeting with independent ranchers, and she's got these pretty good ideas, and I'm like. But at the same time, I knew there was people that were really trying to sabotage her, and I got a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth because I was contacted about a position in the Trump transition team, and I was like, when I got the call, I was like, you got the wrong guy, right? I'm a rancher and I've only had a job on this ranch. And they're like, no, we would like for you to apply. And I thought, well, okay. So I have a pretty good resume, although I'm not highly educated. I have a BS, but it didn't mean nothing to me, right? Cause I was just going to come home. And so, I put a resume together, which I hadn't done in 32 years. And I sent it up there and I got some interviews. I got 3 interviews, and they, albeit 2 of them were kind of late and scattered, but one of them was a very serious interview, and I thought I nailed it, and I did nail it. I know I nailed it. And then I never heard anything back, and I'm like, something's going on. And so I call the guy that interviewed me, and I'm like, I can't just walk away from this ranch. This is a mom and pop operation, but we run some numbers, and I have to be able to plan, because Charlie, I do want to serve my country, because I've been ranching for a long time, and maybe I'm a little bit burned up, and I need something new. I need something fresh, right? So and I enjoy a little bit of politics. So I was like, well, this could be an opportunity. I can just fly back and forth, whatever. And I never heard. So he's like, well, where do you think you fit? And I told him where I thought I fit. And they interviewed me again. And I'm like, well, we might get something here. And it was all new to me, but it was fun. And then it was just crickets. Well, then we go along and I start hearing smatterings of, I've been railed against. And I suppose it's because of my voice, and certainly there's trade organizations that I do not identify with or align with, and I have spoken out against some of their positions. And finally I got the word, I'd been kind of blackballed out there. And I think Secretary Rollins had known about that. And so I said, that's fine. They were very nice. And I said, listen, I have a job. It's good. I don't need a job. So I appreciate the interviews. It was a lot of fun. We went on from that, but I did get a little bit jaded there. I guess because when you lose, you get jaded, right? So I was really kind of thinking at that time, well, maybe these people are right about Rollins. Right. And I didn't know how it worked. So I don't know if she, how deep she knew. Well, then the mod thing, I had been working on the mod thing with the mods in between that, was just kind of helping them be vocal, because what else can I do? I'm not a lawyer. I don't work for anybody. I can just help them, and I understand their plight because I've been through it. And that came out, and I thought then I gained a lot of respect for Rollins, because she did take that case on. And then I got a call from another guy, or it was actually a girl, and she said, I just want you to know you really have been blackballed in DC. And I'm like, what? Who would blackball me? And she goes, but she said, I took care of it. And I said, well, how did you take care of it? And she says, well, I just told them that of all the people I've worked with, Shad Sullivan, she said, I trust Shad Sullivan and his honesty more than anybody, and which flattered me on her account. And I appreciated the confidence there, because I try to do right. I try to be an honest person. And so it wasn't a day after that, things started clicking, because she had talked to a person in DC, and then I had started getting a lot of contacts back there, and that started with some of which was Rollins, and I started gaining more confidence. And then we're looking at all these land issues in the West, and she's addressing them, and she's helping them, the people in New Jersey. I mean, it just was. And so I'm sitting here going, this woman is actually bringing independent ranchers into DC to talk to get their perspective, to help with their ideas. Because after all, you have to remember, Charlie, these people that she was bringing in DC, I'm talking about A.J. Richards, Jack Payne, Hayden Ballard. These guys are on the land. That's their perspective, is true production. And that's what's different about the trade organizations. I mean, I've been called every name in the book by these leaders of these trade organizations who have an office in Denver or DC or wherever it may be, and they don't have skin in the game. And I'm like, this is my perspective. This is how I make a living, is on the cattle. If the cattle don't work, I don't get to eat. And so with her Secretary Rollins recognizing the importance of the independent voice, my whole perspective on her changed. And I wish we could high five and text back and forth every day, but we don't. But listen, Sonny Perdue, what did he tell us? I never met Sonny Perdue, but he said farmers and ranchers are whiners. That's the first thing he said wrong in my book. And the second thing was get big or get out. And I was like, that's not what we're trying to do. We need to spread this food system out. We need more independent ranchers. We need lots more. Smaller, I don't care. I don't care if somebody's big, as long as they're not, being an oligarch or executing a monopolistic style, which is ruined independent ranching. And so I'm excited overall about Secretary Rollins, and I hope that we can work together on behalf of everybody, to get back to your point, the U.S. Forest Service, all of these agencies. I told her, when I've told them all, we have to clean the USDA out from these holdovers, and we have to know who we're hiring. I mean, for goodness sakes, we hired the guy Justin Ransom to run FSIS, who was the father of sustainable development at McDonald's and Tyson. I mean, my gosh, these are the people that are ruining our industry. We can't hire these people. I don't care. We need fewer employees in these agencies, and we need a unified message of freedom and liberty. That's what it's about. All of this goes back to our ability to produce what we want, how we want to, and let the consumer and the demand make the choice. That's how our economy is supposed to work. If it's a bad idea, the consumer is going to tell you that it's a bad idea. We can't have these ideologues telling us how to produce, what to produce, and when to produce. And really, that's been my fight for a long time. So I'm excited about her. I don't know her deeply, but I am excited about her connection to AFPI and TPPF, and her voice on freedom and liberty, because that's been my voice for a long time, is, everything goes back to liberty. And so I'm excited about her. Now, is she perfect? No. Is she a true deep-rooted agriculturalist? No, she's not. But she's personable so far, and she's working her ass off. I mean, she's tweeting 24 hours. I don't know who's tweeting for her, but somebody's tweeting 24 hours a day, and that's good for me. That makes me feel like they actually care. I never knew Sonny Perdue or the other guy.
Sonny Perdue, I think both of them had special interests with big ag. Sonny Perdue was a big exporter of crops, and Tom Vilsack pretty much was a milk king. But what do you say to people? Trump made a comment. You were talking about tweets the other day. He made a comment on Truth Social that after the Argentina deal just got everybody riled up again. But I heard you and Jim on your podcast talking a little bit about the backstory to that. So could you help explain that situation?
So, I don't know, about a year ago, there was a group of self-selected ranchers and beef cattle enterprisers that came together and created what they call the Common Ground Summit. And their goal was to unify the beef and cattle industry to create a list of things that would help make our industries better. And they did create this. They met in Denver, Colorado. It was an invite only, which rubbed a lot of people wrong It didn't rub me wrong because I didn't know anything about it. But they met in Denver and they created a list of things that they wanted to do to help the industry. And that would be access to capital, access to land, how are we going to leave our operations, tax issues, all of those kinds of things. And they were, some really good ideas on there. But the rule was if you came to the meeting, you couldn't talk about the hot button issues, which was MCOOL, checkoff reform, truth and transparency, truth and labeling, all of those things that we care deeply about, at least as an independent operator, I care deeply about. And so they've built this unified coalition of people. And it's not a trade organization, it's just a unified coalition of people. And that morphed into a group of those people being invited out to D.C. a couple of weeks ago to talk to legislators and Secretary Rollins about their issues that concern them. And by the way, there's some really good issues on there. And so they had these hours-long meetings with these legislators, and then the next day they were invited to an announcement in the Oval Office. And in the meantime, one of their biggest critics, a guy by the name of Jack Payne, who owns a livestock marketing center in Nevada, Fallon, Nevada, he's one of their biggest critics. He's not a guy that is a conformer. He's truly independent. He cares about the future of our industry. And Jack's very outspoken. Well, he has been one that Secretary Rollins has put in a group of a few people to talk about federal lands issues. Is Jack Payne, Hayden Ballard, A.J. Richards, and one other gentleman. And they happened to be there at the same time in D.C. talking about these issues as this Common Ground group. Okay, so the way I understand this, and I think this is right, is Trump decides they're going to announce Secretary Rollins' new plan for reviving the cattle industry.
Which is a great plan.
Which is a great plan.
Yeah.
Maybe a little top heavy with subsidies and surveillance, but I like the plan.
Yeah.
And so she has that group of independent ranchers, and then I think the Common Ground people probably knew that they were going to be in there. Well, when they said, come over for this announcement, the White House did, the Common Ground group people said, well, what is this announcement about? Because we were right on the heels of this Argentina announcement, right? And that kind of drove the futures down. And so they wanted to really know up front what he was going to announce, and they wouldn't tell him he would not tell them what he was going to announce, him and Rollins, and they declined to go to the Oval Office over that. Well, what happened there was that I don't know if that embarrassed President Trump or it just insulted him, which it would have me too, I suppose. And then President Trump comes out with the Truth Social post and drives it down some more, and they announced the plan. Well, the plan is great and it's fantastic, but it's totally been overridden by this Truth Social post, which, listen, I'm a truther. President Trump should have never posted anything about how he's helped the ranchers. The tariffs have not had an effect on this high cattle market. That's just not factually true. And so this Truth Social post really just kind of stirred the pot and made everybody mad. Common Ground was mad. Trump was mad. That other group, they were mad because Common Ground didn't come to the Oval Office, which I would say, if Biden invited me to the Oval Office to talk about ag issues, I'm going to be there. Even if I have to ride my horse clear to D.C., I'm going to be there. There was no way I was turning down a 10-minute deal with President Trump. And so the plan, which is a fantastic plan, 13 pages, was overshadowed by all of this rhetoric. And it just, ever since then, the market's just been on a downward trend. I mean, I look today, November feeder cattle hit a high on October 13th of 381.50, And today they closed limit down at 325 and some change, and that's all in a 20-day period. And that is not normal market functions, although I understand that the board CME is not really, it is separated from the cash market now, but we still, as a producer, I still use it as a price protection mechanism in my operation. So here I am out buying these high dollar cattle, which have come off a lot, but I can't hedge because we've lost the value in the CME. And that's part of the risk I take. But the backstory of that was just what I said. I mean, they should not have ever declined. We wouldn't be here today had they not declined that invitation. Now, I'm not saying they wouldn't have made him mad and he wouldn't have tweeted. He probably would have tweeted because that's just President Trump, right? I mean, I knew that he was an emotionally driven man. He's a power broker all day long, and I just come to expect those things from him. But when we have a new administration that is saying goodbye to all of this climate change garbage that is inhibiting our production and our ability to feed our families and our communities, and these people set a standard for him, I'm like, don't do that. That's not where we need to go. This man is willing to work with us. I believe he loves us. I believe he loves agriculture. We all knew he was going to put tariffs on when he was coming in. We all expected it to get rough for a time. I didn't, the cattle business was, the fundamentals of the cattle business are such that we have the lowest numbers in history. So that was really kind of a safe place to be, right? And, I'm disappointed that his base, we are his base. American agriculture, except in pockets, there's a lot of Democrats that hate him, Democrat farmers that hate him, but we are really in the West his base because he represents what we love, and that is our families, our communities, and our country under liberty and freedom, constitutionally driven. That's who we are in the West. And that can't be argued. So I think that's really what happened.
He's bringing in beef from Argentina, which I don't agree with. But people ask you, well, you voted for him. Well, the other vote was going to put price controls in place, which would have never gone away, and that would have just completely killed the industry, completely killed everything. So it's and really, I'm not sure that importing beef from Argentina is going to do much at the grocery store. But
I'll just tell you this: boxed beef has been up every single day since that tweet. Every day. We saw this in 2015. That's where our main complaint came from, is when the prices dropped. The boxed beef didn't. The corporates were still making record profits. What happened during COVID? I mean, nothing in the store went down, and we're not going to import. Listen, I don't want any more beef from Argentina, no more than you do. That's really what got me going in 2020 is when I did that video and said, why are we bringing in Namibian beef into the United States when they want to kill our own harvest because nobody can harvest them, right? We don't need to be importing this beef. I'm not for that. But the amount of beef that they're suggesting we import is not going to have any kind of effect at the grocery store. That's just a fact. Now, if they decide to open the border to 1 million head of live cattle imports out of Mexico, that's a whole different story, right?
But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon with the worm.
The New World screwworm?
Yeah.
I would think it's not, but that's, the board was down. On Monday this week, we were up the limit. We were headed back up. On Tuesday, which was yesterday, it opened up $5, and then in 2 minutes, on a rumor of the screwworm coming to the United States, it went down $7, closed down. Today, it closed down the limit. The rumor is that Trump and Rollins were talking about opening the border live cattle imports. I am telling you, I believe Rollins when she says we are going to push that fly back south before we open this border. And I can only do that because her word, my word is my bond. I am giving her the chance to say her word is her bond. I believe what she says. If her actions show different, I will admit it all day long. But right now, they're not going to open the border because of that screwworm. But these rumors, this is the disconnect between cash and futures is that the futures, all of this is emotionally driven, rumor driven, and we're talking about so much money nowadays that one move, $1, we don't move. I when I first got into the business, a limit move was $1.50 a day. Our limit moves now on the first day are $7.50, on the second day are $13.50, somewhere in there. We're talking about massive amounts of money, billions of dollars, billions. So if these guys, which the corporates, many of the corporates were upside down in their hedges, in other words, they hedged at a certain price level and then it went against them. This was my story this year. I hedged all of my yearlings at 273. I said, that's the best hedge in history. It's good business, Shad. They didn't make that much money, but I was safe at that price level because we had never been at that price level. And I thought, well, this thing's going to fall back and we could lose everything. Well, I didn't realize, Charlie, that it would go $100 against me. And so I'm putting in margin calls, hundreds of thousands of dollars in margin calls. Well, these big guys were doing the same thing. I know a guy who stopped his margin calls at $20 million. This is massive amounts of money. So now those guys that have lost all this money and have this power and control are short in the market, and anybody, me, you, anybody could make a rumor, put it out on social media in America, and the board drops like that, just like it did today. Limit down, you get all your money back. I mean, it's so wild. And when I first got into the business, I did go to college and I took futures and options, and I really learned futures and options from my dad after I got out of college. But You talk about that kind of money and you're just flabbergasted because it's not thousands, it's hundreds of thousands and millions now. And it's a very dangerous game to be in. When I first went to work for my dad, the very first set of cattle I bought myself, I opened an account in Chicago, and I can remember signing a document and it said, trading at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the CME, you have to have the cattle to back this hedge up. And now it's not. When we were in college, we learned about futures and options. And if there was a seller, there had to be a buyer, which there still is. But those people had to make good on those contracts. There was a delivery date and a delivery point of the tangible product. It's not that way anymore. It's all speculation. And that's why we have this very corrupt and crooked divide between cash and futures. And I'm no expert. I'm just telling you my experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. Same thing with gold. I mean, a lot of those contracts don't really represent any gold at all.
Yeah, it's all paper.
Ancient eras and natural selection have refined and tailored pristine fibers with the resilience for today's days. Evolving beyond the last ice age, bison wool is nature's most dependable activewear. Buffalo Wool Company, 100% proven by nature, 100% American made.
Check out the Buffalo Wool Company collection at yanasatradingco.com.
Shad, what do you think is, we've seen the recent case with the mods, which got dropped. It puzzles me, though, how that particular special investigator, or whatever Travis Lunder's title was, how he is still with the Forest Service after all of that, because it did seem a bit overreaching. But do you think that these types of things are behind us, or do you think these are still very real problems that ranchers are going to be facing in the future?
It's a great question, and the answer is we're going to be facing this for a long time to come.
So how do you convince ranchers, you open up BLM lands, how do you convince ranchers to invest money in the infrastructure that has to go into those leases when the chances are that they could get prosecuted, kicked off the land? Point Reyes,
right.
From what I understand, they were pretty much forced off with too many contingencies on staying there.
Absolutely.
So,
well, I think at the very core, farmers and ranchers are risk takers, right? And if they are presented an opportunity to expand, they'll take it and take the risk with it. And so there, you can put that in a box over here. And then you have what we just talked about with these agencies, and I'm talking the Department of Interior and the USDA, and we have to convince those people that if we are going to truly be America first under this administration, we have to get rid of those bad apples. All of these, we have to understand that not all of these employees and these holdovers are bad people. Some of them love America. Some of them don't love America. Some of them are hiding out to implement this agenda. But it's all interwoven into the risk that we all take. So I don't think that convincing farmers and ranchers to invest in this long term it might be an issue to some, but to the ones who really are dedicated to the lifestyle, I don't think that's the issue. The issue becomes who is going to have the power, what kind of people are going to have the power, and we're seeing what we saw in the Mod case with Travis Lenders. I'm not sure he has a job today. I really don't know. I've heard both sides of the story, and nobody, Julie Wheeler and him, both. I've heard that they've been fired, that, we were horrible to them, that we ruined great people's lives. And to the contrary is, I don't think we did, and I don't know if they have their jobs or not. But the precedent that the Mod case set was one that the powers that be, the authorities, Secretary Rollins and Burgum, say, hey, this is how we're going to do this, and if you can't abide by the rules, then you have to go or face whatever punishment. I realize they probably can't fire them at these points. Maybe they can. I don't know how that works, Charlie. But certainly we can set the precedent, and that's really what the Mod case was. Now, if we're talking about Point Reyes, which is kind of like my story, to be honest with you, this is an example of why public-private partnerships are dangerous all the time, is because the Nature Conservancy and the Park Service have a partnership there. And you cannot ever, I was just talking to a guy in my hometown. My wife sits on the city council here in Texas, and they have a gentleman, and he says, I'm going out and getting a public-private partnership. We're going to rebuild this old hotel in town. And I said, Tom, that's not a good idea. And I said, and he didn't understand why I meant that. I said, even though it's a great idea on the local level, it opens the door to power and corruption structures that you have no idea about down the road. And that's exactly what happened, with Point Reyes. That's an old partnership. Should have never happened. And then we had the Sustains Act brought to us by a Republican that promotes public-private partnerships. And I will say this, I was able to, when we met with Secretary Rollins, to advise her chief of staff about public-private partnerships. And I told her exactly what I'm telling you, and I told her our story and all this, and she said, I'd never had any idea that's what could come from a public-private partnership. Because, Charlie, when you take these ideologues' money to push an agenda, listen, let's talk about the Nature Conservancy. They, last year, $456 million from the taxpayers, plus all of the people who donate to them and their membership. We can't compete with that kind of money. And that's what the danger of public-private partnerships is because the public part of the partnership has to abide by whoever's pushing the money, right?
And what I think is interesting is when you look at the Mods case, number one, Heather Mod back in 2014, just a couple weeks after the first Bundy standoff, interviewed the entire Bundy family, and then she ended up in that situation, in 2024. But which is just irony in that scenario.
It is,
But
it is irony, and I did not know that.
yeah, it's an old Fence Post article. I was reading, so I guess last September, and you could look at the Bundys as heroes and villains at the same time. You could look at the FBI agents involved as the same, because they broke a lot of rules themselves. I mean, the whole thing was out of control. But they got a hero award, which kind of made me start digging into it. One of the articles that I found on it was written by Heather Maud back in 2014. It was dated April 28th, which was literally just right after it ended. So,
Right.
But the Nature Conservancy, right when the mods started having all this trouble, bought a very large ranch that, if you were to just kind of visualize connecting, some of those national parks and grasslands straight across out towards Custer, that ranch is a huge purchase right there. I know that the previous owners, and when I was looking at the timing of that, I couldn't help but think maybe the Nature Conservancy, and I'm not saying that they did or didn't, but it looks like, one of those things where maybe Travis Lunders had these ideologies and knew the type of transactions and was trying to play a puzzle game, but it seemed like they were trying to get the mods off their land, and the fines, force them into selling some of their other lands. That's, theory. It's not fact. But.
Well, let me tell you what I think. That purchase that you were talking about was 26,000 acres, I think, and it's not new. It's not a new ideology or whatever you want to call it. But the new movement is wildlife corridors. And that's what I think that was all a part of, was wildlife corridors. Now, the reason I say that is because in Colorado now, we are running into a lot of this nonsense. And so the State Land Board of Colorado recently, this is why I think this is all interwoven. So they passed House Bill 1332, or maybe I can't remember if it's how it was 1332, and that gave. Let me back up. So Governor Polis appoints the State Land Board members in Colorado. I think there's 8 of them. Then this year they passed 1332. He signed it into law, which gives him the power to create a coalition of 20 people to oversee how the revenue of state lands is going to be gotten, how they're going to bring. So normally that's all energy, mining, logging, and agriculture. But now they want to change all this to conservation. So this new coalition of people is going to oversee the land board and suggest different varieties of revenue coming off these state lands. Okay, so you have that, you put it in a box. Then the State Land Board hires Nicole Rose Marino, who is an eco-terrorist and was involved in blowing up, or highly supported blowing up, this ski slope because of the Canadian lynx back in Vail in the 1990s, and she was very supportive of it. She is now the executive director. She's the top dog on staff at the Colorado State Land Board. She sat on the board of directors for the not the Wildlands Institute, but it's the Rewilding Institute, and she sat on that board of directors. Well, they're all for wildlife corridors. So now she's working with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which they were the very first ones in 2014 to want to put this national heritage area over southeast Colorado, which would be 8 counties in southeast Colorado, millions of acres, a national heritage area. We had no idea that they were going to do this, except that a Park Service employee leaked it to my friend Kimmy Lewis, who is a state legislator. She's dead now. That's the only reason we knew that. So now the U.S. Forest Service is over what they call these national grasslands, which are in the southeast corner and southwest corner of Kansas. It's the Cimarron National Grassland in Kansas and the Comanche National Grasslands in Tempest in south of La Junta, Colorado. And they have decided, in working with the Nature Conservancy, that grazing is a danger. And they have all these other words. I have to read it all. But grazing is a danger, and they want to change the management plan. That these ranchers have owned these ranches and paid lease on these national grasslands for generations. So inside of these grasslands are state lands. See how this gets interwoven? So now you have the Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the U.S. Forest Service and the State Land Board coming together to want to change the management plans up, and it's just blowing up. And I told Secretary Rollins about it 2 days ago, and she said, I'll get on it. Okay. Well, what that's doing...
I actually think I did an article on this recently, or maybe I was researching one and it just never got published. But
no, that's exactly what's happening. This is these partnerships, and it's all... So back to your point in South Dakota, I think it's all about rewilding, because if Proposition 82 and 98 get on the ballot in Colorado, that creates a board of 9 members that would take statutory control over all of this and tell you on your own private property, it would give them statutory control of it. The Endangered Species Act, they want to put in wildlife corridors, all of these crazy things. They were even talking at the latest Colorado Parks and Wildlife meeting about ending the use of live bait to go fishing in Colorado. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. And like you said, they've somehow turned a lot of the hunting groups against ranchers too. I actually read a post, but I didn't read the article. I just saw it, and it caught me by surprise. I think it was on Substack, where they said, ranchers are the enemies of hunters, and it was talking about the corner crossing case, which I guess has come back up. Yeah. But I was just like, ranchers aren't the enemy. You wouldn't have as much game as you're hunting right now if it wasn't for them preserving the lands that they're...
The problem, this is the problem, and this is what happened to our cattle and beef industry, is these ideologues infiltrated into these trade organizations. So, that's what we saw with the World Wildlife Fund and the NCBA when they partnered up through the beef checkoff. I mean, they were literally partners. These people are on record of saying cattle are killing the planet, and yet we have trade associations partnering up with them on the sustainable development lie. That's what happened in 2023 when, I shared my presentation, The War on Beef, with you. When Miles Allen teaches over there at Oxford University, partners up with Dr. Marco Springman, and Springman does this red meat study on Americans, and that study was published by Miles Brown, the CEO and founder of Impossible Foods, and the Journal of I can't remember the journal that published that, but he's the founder of both of them, and he was the keynote speaker at the NCBA convention. These people are on record of saying cattle are killing the planet. You cannot, I told them a long time ago, you can't sit at the table with these people because they want to kill you.
Yeah. You're the competition.
Crazy times, Charlie.
Yeah.
And listen, I love the hunters. I mean, we host hunters on our ranch. All we really have is antelope, pronghorn antelope, and we host 5 to 10 hunters every year. We love hunting, but those ideologues are infiltrating into those groups, and they're changing their culture too. That's exactly what happened to our industry, and it's damn scary because the hunters and the cattlemen should be working together. They have the same political philosophy for the most part. They believe in the land. They're rooted in the land and what comes off of the land and feeding their families. And so for them to turn their backs on agriculture, and I know the emotion that the public lands issues bring out. Hunting on these are our public lands. We're going to hunt on them. But it can go together, and it needs to go together. And so I don't know. You're probably the one that's going to have to, heal or at least do something about that relationship. I don't know how to handle that at all, because we've always had great relationships with hunters. But now that meat eater guy, I told Jim the other day, I used to watch that meat eater guy all the time, but now they're kind of talking the opposite way. And I'm like, I don't know about this, boys.
One last question for you, because I know we've been on for a while, so I don't even know how many people would be watching at this point, but it's been a good conversation. In Secretary Rollins' plan, do you think, I might be crazy here, but I feel like deregulation is one of the things that hasn't been hit on hard enough. And I feel that way coming from, I've been out west, and I've been to a lot of ranches out west filming documentaries, and I understand how the whole system works. But when you get out to the East Coast, you have a lot of small farms, but they don't have a whole lot of market access. And the way I feel like the system is kind of rigged, you've got a lot of large ranches out west who also don't have market access because they don't have consumers. They have to, go into the market to make it on the grocery store shelves. And it's not like the small farms out east are going to compete with that in a big way. But the regulations are so tight, even at the state level, that, for me to sell a cow to somebody, let's say I sell a quarter or half, I can't do that because I have to have a meat handler's license just to pick it up from an inspected facility and take it to their house in a cooler. Because that's most of what farmers like us out on the East Coast do, is we pick it up, take it straight to them. Instead, we have to have a facility with freezers, and it has to be inspected by, the state before we can get our license. And it's actually, for a small farm, that's pretty hefty investment. So, I look at some of these things, and then just looking across the United States at different size processors, you have small processors who have to live up to regulations somewhat similar to some of the guys processing 4,000 animals a day. They don't have the same exposure to E. coli and salmonella. They're not doing the same volume. Right, so I feel like if they really wanted to increase meat availability fast, it's going to take a while, like you said, to regrow the herds. But deregulation seems like it would be a faster route.
Well, I couldn't agree more, because, hey man, I'm one of these freedom and liberty guys, and I don't know, I've not been to the East Coast but twice in my life, so I don't, I know everything. I buy a lot of cattle out of the Southeast, and I know those come from very small herds, right? And so I understand that portion of it, but absolutely, we need to make these things easier. Massey's Prime Act would certainly help those people. I think Massey, when we talked to Massey, I don't know, a month or 6 weeks ago, and he said he had to drive 2 hours to get an animal slaughtered. And
oh yeah,
it's kind of blowing my mind. Now, with what you said,
that's after a year's long wait to get it into the processor.
Unbelievable. That is just unbelievable. It would be a quicker, I think it's a state's issue, and I don't know what to tell you there, other than I agree with you. It would be quicker, and the whole premise of what we're fighting for is to spread this food system out, right? Because number one, you just said it, it spreads the danger out as well. Once you get these thousands of head into these big facilities, and then they're recall, all of that, which is out of my purview, but it happens all the time, right? I always say, if there was anything that COVID did good for us, it was make us recognize how the monopolistic oligarchs' danger have created a dangerous food system, right? That's what they've done. Is they've concentrated the food system and the power that goes with that into these small areas, and then all of a sudden you have something like COVID comes along, and then it truly is a national security issue. And I'm not the expert on all of that, but our local communities depend on some of that deregulation for sure. And I'm not saying I don't support, a safe and healthy food supply, because I do. I've seen a deal. I saw a deal back when I was younger that, his family was coming in, or this family had moved in from another country, and they were, slaughtering cattle and goats and everything on their little farm up around Colorado Springs, and I was like, this is not good, and that didn't feel safe to me, right? So it's not that I don't support the safety mechanisms, but I do support more the freedom and liberty aspect of it. And why do we have to make, these local facilities, and they're adhering to these tremendous EPA standards that just cost the local facility so much money that they can't compete. And that's why, I always go back to a friend of mine. You probably know Mike Calicrate. And Mike and I'm a conservative. Mike's not really on that side, but he's pretty much in the middle. And he just has a lot of wisdom. This is what I tell everybody. I quote him: break them up. Break them up. That's as easy as it is. And I do support a lot of deregulation. It's not that I don't support oversight. I do support oversight, but in the same sense, that bureaucracy has become so powerful. These are not new issues. I can remember in the early 80s, I can remember my dad and a guy that owned this huge sale barn in Colorado talking, and he says, I can remember that old man saying, Jerry, the feds are closing these local packing houses up. That was an issue then, right? And so we've got a long way to go, and I don't know what the answers are on that. I just don't know. I know I have access to a USDA facility. I feel safe and good about it because it's small. They don't kill that many. And I wish that for everybody. I want everybody to be able to do that. And, I grew up on a ranch where my mom made me kill chickens. And that was terrible. I hate chicken killing day. And when I was a sophomore in high school, my dad said, Linda, no more chickens. And we didn't ever do that again. But the reason I'm telling you this is because we did kill chickens on our ranch, and we killed our own beef. We grew our own garden. We milked our cows. My mom and her folks sold cream and milk and eggs forever out of their back door. And it was a great, healthy, wholesome community, right? And if that's what people want, I'm all for it. Now, I will give Governor Polis out of Colorado this credit, and he deserves no more than this. But during COVID, they presented a bill and passed a bill that you could provide meat, eggs, poultry, whatever it was, your farm commodities, you could sell them person to person as long without oversight, state government oversight, as long as both parties had signed an affidavit of understanding. And he signed that into law. And I thought that was really good. Now, on the backside of that, he said, let's go for a meatless Monday and stop eating beef. Have a meat out day. So we had to spank him on that. But I did appreciate him signing that bill into law. And I think we could do that all over the nation too.
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense. I mean, that's one of those things where, like you said, it's a state issue, but Rollins could definitely put it out there and put some pressure on it. I mean, she
Absolutely.
put pressure on that little town in New Jersey, and that was a state issue, and look what happened.
And I will tell you today, she met with the King family out in Washington, actually yesterday. And that's a state issue too. The Washington State Department of Ecology and the Department of Natural Resources have colluded and fined Ecology fined the King family $267,000 and threatened them with civil charges for cleaning out 6.3 acres of ponds to hold more water. And so
I did a story on that one too.
did you?
Yeah.
So they met yesterday, and I talked to Wade this morning, and he said that meeting went great. So, her influence is very powerful, and I'm going to say that she's probably somebody that is firm and stern, but is maybe pleasant to work with. She's getting a lot of stuff done, and that's why I think our trade organizations need to find some more support, and we need to be talking about this plan more, but it's a story for a different day.
What do you think she's going to be able to do out there in Washington? Because that's a pretty tough state.
It's really tough, and I don't know. That's going to be a great question. I think if they put enough pressure, if we all put enough pressure visibly on the issue, and her and Trump work their magic, maybe they can get something done. But certainly the Kings have been run over and erroneously fined for very stupid, minuscule stuff. And it's all just about getting the producers off the land. And that's part of why I'm saying, in at least these federal agencies, while we have Trump in office, we need to get rid of these holdovers. We have to. That's a state's issue, and those are very liberal states, and you're not going to control that, who they have there. But if we have the ideologues gone out of the federal agencies, that would help tremendously put pressure on the state agencies, I think. So
yeah,
maybe not. I don't know. It is happening more and more. I mean, I've got 2 families in New Mexico that are having Forest Service issues. One in Arizona that the Forest Service is threatening, just like they did mods. And I got him with a lawyer in Roger McAllen, and then there was one more in Arizona, but it never ends. This stuff is never ending, and I think it's something we're going to fight for freaking ever. And the West, the West is prime hunting grounds, because just like Nicole Rose Marino, her goal, and it's stated, you need to do some research on her, but she stated that land is cheap in the short grass prairies, and to us, it's very expensive, but to those ENGOs, it's very cheap. I mean, our ranch in Colorado, I had it valued last year, and I was so excited because we finally hit the $400 an acre, ceiling, and they think that land is cheap, and so they're gobbling up these ranches, and they put them together, and then you have the situation like what you're talking about in South Dakota, and it's more and more and more, and it's very, very dangerous. Our communities are dying in Southeast, all over the West. Our small communities are dying. We don't have full football teams. We have to share teams with other towns. Our churches are closing. You know the story, and it's a bad deal. It takes us all, and I think we just need to have that voice of liberty out there. That includes yours and Keeley's and the mods and all of these things, because they, I have this massive responsibility, or I guess it's like a brick on my shoulders, to leave something better for our kids. And I think that's just one of the most important things, is that they get to taste freedom. And I like this deal that happened in New York today. I'm so upset about it because I always say 3 generations removed from your food supply or production of your food supply, you take everything for granted. They just don't know the suffering that could take place, and that controlled supply chains, controlled production, controlled consumption is a dangerous place to be in, and everybody likes to call it democratic socialism, and there's no such thing. It's communism, and I hope that doesn't spread, but I fear it will. I mean, we're fighting it in Texas too, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, I think that New York has become a test city.
I agree.
What is the Bezos Earth? So they basically invested a bunch of money to try and create a cow that has less methane.
So what breeding? They want to do is they want to create an EPD, expected progeny difference, through genetic selection with this money, right? So basically what you're saying is right, is they gave them this $4.5 million, and they want to do these studies to create an EPD that would lower the methane production. Yeah. And I mean, all it is just like Jim Mundorf says, it's buying into the lie. And the problem with it is not buying into the lie, but the problem is they took the money without telling their membership. It was very non-transparent. And most of their membership, they probably knew most of their membership were not signing on to the climate change stuff and didn't support that kind of rhetoric. And they took it anyway, and it upset a bunch of them, but it didn't do any good because they didn't get any new board members in at their convention this weekend. So I guess all is well that ends well, whatever.
Well, I've seen a lot of similar industries get a lot of scientific funding in recent years, and it just seems like it's a backdoor thing to get in there.
All it is it's just money laundering. That's all it is, right? That's just like that. I think one of the greatest crises in agriculture now is beyond even the 30 by 30 is the climate smart commodity program. I mean, if there ever was a communist move by a federal, by the federal government, that was it. To pay all of these colleges and universities and media to promote climate change. I mean, that only happens in communist countries. That kind of propaganda is just so incredibly dangerous. And I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's where we're headed. I hope not. I feel like it is, but my dad died 15 years ago, and I can remember every day he had bone cancer, and every day I'd take him out and I'd sit him on the front porch of his old bunkhouse, which we used as a saddle shop. And I can remember it was the worst drought in my lifetime and his. And we had 3,000 calves that we needed to go. We ship all of these calves out of Texas to the northern states to graze on our ranches up there. And we were in a terrible drought in Colorado, and he was dying. It was a hell of a time. I'll tell you what happened. In March, my mom, he's dying of cancer. I'm down here putting cattle together, and my mom's taking care of him in Colorado. She's elderly, and she goes out in March, I think it was March 15th, to feed the horses, and the wind was blowing out of the north like 40 mile an hour, and the wind spooked a colt and run over my mom and broke her back. And so she was 500 yards from the house, and when she woke up, she had to crawl to the house, and she got to the house, and My dad is in this is how late stages he was in, where he was hallucinating. And she said, Jerry, I'm hurt, from the kitchen, and he was in the living room, and he goes, you want to talk to me? You're going to have to get in here and talk to me. I can't hear you. And she goes, no, Jerry, I'm hurt bad. And of course, we're 60 miles, 70 miles from a hospital. So he jumps up, and he, I don't know, he got her halfway to town. And then on the way to town, she called the ambulance, and they met halfway. Well, anyway, to make the long story short, during this whole period, my mom breaks her back, my dad's dying of cancer, and we're in the worst drought in history in Crowley County, Colorado. And I sat with my dad and I said, what do you want me to do with all these calves? Because we all knew he was dying. And he said, I don't know, I'm done, right? And I'm like, good grief. But he said in that conversation, this is what I'm getting to. He said in that conversation, Charlie, he says, Shad, we'll never change the world until everybody sits in the dark, cold and hungry. And that has resonated with me from that day on. I'll never forget him saying that, because we were talking about, the condition of our country. And he says, we'll never go back until everybody sits in the dark, cold and hungry. And that suffering, because he came from a place of suffering in his life. But that suffering is what tied him so closely to love of country and his roots in the land, and his appreciation for, the small things. And to this day, I believe that to your point, it's not too late. We may have to suffer to get back to the basics. That's how I see it.